system continues to fail black people, and they will continue to fail you all. Like I said, because this happened with Orlando, when they get done with us, they're coming from you, for you, and all your interracial children. Y'all are next.
For those of you who don't remember, that was the mother of Philando Castile, a black man gunned down in the summer of 2016 during a routine traffic stop. We're going to come back to that case because it is important for a number of reasons. The question we are answering in this video is whether it was a good idea for the prosecutor to elevate the charges against Officer Chauvin to second-degree murder. The short answer is this: all things being equal, the chances of a conviction are still the same, and that is in part due to Minnesota Statute 631.14. This statute can be used when a defendant is charged with a crime that has multiple degrees. First-degree murder has what are called lesser included offenses. Those lesser included offenses are second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and the various manslaughter degrees. We know from the last video that as the degree gets higher, the harder it is for the prosecution to prove their case. Fortunately for Mr. Floyd, this statute gives the prosecution a few bites at the apple. All of this means the following: a jury may find the officer not guilty of second-degree murder. However, the jury can still find the officer guilty of an inferior degree, aka third-degree murder. By all means, I am not advocating for a third-degree murder conviction. The prosecution should do a thorough investigation and charge Officer Chauvin with the highest degree possible. That brings me to the prosecution. The Attorney General of Minnesota has taken over the prosecution of this case. His name is Keith Ellison, a black man who I am sure wants to do good for his people and his constituents. At one point, he was even a member of the Nation of Islam.
Now, Keith was in the Nation in 1995.
That's right.
He was selling the Final Call newspaper. Beautiful brother. And being in Minnesota, I think that's where he's from, he wants to help his community. He's a lawyer, so he wants to help his community.
And I agree with the minister that he wants to help his community. But politics always seem to add pressure to a prosecutor's job, which is why this case was reassigned in the first place. Hopefully, the Attorney General doesn't face any political pressure that would affect his ability to prosecute this case. People are already saying how detrimental an acquittal would be to the Attorney General's political career. In addition, the media never seems to forget Mr. Ellison's relationship with Minister Farrakhan, and they periodically check his stance on the issue when Ellison is trying to make political advances in his career.
I absolutely unqualifiedly denounce and dismiss and avoid and reject the views of Louis Farrakhan.
Let's hope none of these political pressures play a role in this case, and Ellison will be able to focus on the task at hand. Going back to Philando Castile's case. Philando Castile's case is important because we can learn by comparing an unsuccessful prosecution to this case. Philando and George Floyd both lived in Minnesota. They were both killed by officers, and both of those officers were charged. Philando's killer was only charged with second-degree manslaughter, which means that person A causes the death of person B by culpable negligence, whereby the defendant created an unreasonable risk and consciously took a chance of causing death or great bodily harm. When the officer was acquitted, feelings of numbing disbelief went around the world. People wondered how this officer could be acquitted. The jurors told us exactly why.
I feel so sorry for Diamond Reynolds, I do. I mean, I absolutely do. But personally, I didn't find her credible.
That it was.
She says the jury largely struggled with Diamond Reynolds' credibility in court, but she says the case ultimately came down to the dashcam video, specifically the part that nobody could see, Philando Castile's final movements in the car.
The big question was, is he bringing out a gun? What is he bringing out? You know, that was our question.
You have your license and insurance?
Tell you, I do have a firearm on me.
Don't reach for it then.
I'm
Don't pull it out.
I'm
Don't pull it out.
And if you thought that that officer was culpably negligent, you weren't the only one.
Off? All you can say is how? How can a jury full of people possibly watch this video and just let this man walk? Who are these cold-hearted jurors with no conscience, no sympathy, no empathy for this situation?
Witness for the state, retired police officer and use of force expert Jeff Noble testified that he's watched every piece of video and read every report from the shooting death of Philando Castile. And he told the jury, "It is my opinion that Officer Yanez's use of force was objectively unreasonable. It was excessive and inappropriate." Noble said Officer Yanez didn't give clear commands, saying Yanez should have told Castile to stop and put his hands on the steering wheel or dash. And Noble doesn't believe Yanez saw a gun in the car. The prosecution methodically went through the squad car dash camera video with Noble, pausing each time Yanez failed to warn a fellow officer that he saw a gun. Noble said, quote, "I would expect him to tell other officers there is a gun present and where the gun is at." Then, finally on the video, minutes later, Officer Yanez is heard telling his supervisor, "I don't know where the gun was. He didn't tell me where the gun was. He was just staring straight ahead, and I was getting nervous."
We all want to do our part in making sure that this officer does not get off scot-free. And for that to happen, we have to remain educated. We have to understand that the lesser included offense statute takes care of the concern that Officer Chauvin could get off if he is not convicted of second-degree murder. The bigger issues in the prosecution of Officer Chauvin are going to be jury selection, politics, and the ability of the prosecutor to tell a human story. We, the public, need to ensure that we keep the pressure on, so that Mr. Ellison can keep his proverbial knee pressed into the neck of Officer Chauvin throughout the course of this prosecution.